The perplexing thing I often come up against is the idea that people have certain strengths of character, and yet they are also part of a discourse system, and they change over time, and they certainly either manifest or don't, depending on the discourse you're involved in. Yet they seem to be also something that someone holds as part of who they are. And I come up against, using the VIA assessment or strengths, any type of strength assessment that's not relational, or some questions might be relational, but you come away with a list, with a composite, these are your strengths. And part of me gets that and feels like there's some validity to that, and then part of me is perplexed by that and upset that I believe it. So any wisdom about that, I'd appreciate.
The constructionist. We know we exist.
Most of us have grown up, maybe Japanese less than, and Chinese less than Westerners, with a highly individualist view of the person. That is where you have talents and you have abilities and performances, and they're all yours because your actions begin here. They don't begin behind you; they begin right here. So and all of us have that. That would come from that tradition, and you can't just throw it away. It's there as one of your strong voices. And to me, the interesting thing is how can you move out of that in ways that understand whatever strengths are, they come out of a confluence of relationships of some kind, and that could be among people, but it also could be among artifacts. But skills are brought out into being. I mean, anything can be a skill if you've got the people who will agree it's a skill, even silence. Non-movement can be a great skill. So it really depends on the confluence. So the focus then should be on the confluence which brings about that which we would call a skill.
The focus should be on the confluence.
Yeah, on the conflicts, the relatedness of it all, which is an interesting. So we don't have to throw away tools that we find interesting, like this strength finder and the VIA, some of these assessments, but we might ask different questions of people as they learn about it, and it's what relationships have helped create this experience for them. Of seeing themselves in this way, or in what settings, so maybe there's a way of still using these tools in a relational way. We certainly know that we need to develop some relational measurements and assessments, that whether it's about the quality of a leadership relationship as opposed to the quality of a leader. But in organizations, these kinds of tools are profoundly valuable.
Are they really?
Financially, you mean, or in terms of?
No, are they really valuable? I mean,
yeah.
Why are they valuable?
Why are they valuable?
Because people have agreed that they are valuable.
You get social instruction.
And because they can start a conversation. And they can start a conversation from a socially constructed place, from my perspective, your perspective, and then how do we?
And it's also one of the differences, I
like
think.
that as a beginning.
Right.
But the notion of evaluation, who's doing that evaluation, from what criteria, and what perspective are they coming from, and who am I being evaluated by somebody else, and now I'm under pressure to be something, and then the whole evaluation process is...
It's more than evaluation, Ken. These are tools that people use to sort of know who they are in relation to others. So in the organizational world, you've heard of Myers-Briggs that grows out of, it's used extensively. You've heard of the Strength Finder that grows out of the Gallup work. So those kinds of things are vehicles for conversation. But the business world doesn't live in an ongoing, emergent sensibility. When we're working in business, there's the question of how do you know you've done what you said you were going to do? How do you measure the impact, the results? Those questions are intimately part of the discourse of an organization, which I would contend is different than whether you're in family therapy or you're in a team. There are places where you can allow the openness of the dialogue to take its own form. And there are places where we must give it form, but no, it's only a form that we're giving it. It's not the reality. So I would love to see us in a world of constant organizing, but then what happens in a place like Arab Spring, where we've got constant flux, but where's the new structure? How does it emerge? So in this dance that we do, we've got to be moving in and out of, I think, some of things that we have together created and said, let's use this as a tool to go forward for now, but not believe it forever.
And now we're talking to the Japanese people who are trying to listen to this. And is this too much?
What do you mean too much?
Well, you asked for 5 minutes.
Oh,
And
yeah,
now we have
yeah.
another
Yeah,
question.
I
Oh,
can
we
cut.
could,
That's fine. Yeah.
Julie,
Yeah.
your next question.
We are in on the third question,
Yeah,
right?
we have
Yeah,
a
we're
third.
going to third,
And
right?
it strikes me that we are, you've seen us as a global organization. Carlos was in your pre-workshop.
Oh, Carlos, yes,
was
yes.
part of it as well. And one of the things that we started talking about yesterday is when we, from time to time, when we frame our appreciative inquiry questions, even though we're attempting to explore a more collective understanding of the world, we're dealing with almost meta-discursive systems in terms of, for instance, Asian Eastern communities, where collectivism is more of the meta-discourse compared to the states where individualism. We started talking about that a bit, but we're wondering what practices do you think would be helpful to even start to bridge that meta conversation
Between, for example,
whole societies where there is an emphasis in a value and in the
like,
collective,
so working in Japan as
yes,
as AI consultants, for example?
using American created AI tools.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
social constructionist tools. How do you see constructionist being meaningful for different cultures?
Well, I guess first of all, one recognizes that there are multiple constructions going on even within what seems
Yes.
to be
Yes, indeed.
one culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Agree.
and one of the things I think about is the work Diana did. We talked about this earlier in our workshop today, Diana, about how you asked people from various religions to bring an icon or an object that was dear to them. So to find the overlaps and the sharing and the kind of impulses that might be recognized, because we're collectivists to some extent. We have collectivist potentials as well as individualistic ones. I was thinking about what Claire had to say too, that in herself she finds this idea of individual strengths. Well,
And the tension.
if you think about being multiple, having multiple possibilities coming out of your diverse backgrounds and your relationships with other people, with animals, with the earth perhaps, with religious icons.
Now
and
you're talking
books.
my language, you know that.
that you can find within yourself, that the kind of crossovers, even though they may be larger in one group than in another, and that things like, I think sensual things, I mean, like a salad, sensual things and dance and music, and to some extent, not everything, but the finding sensual commonalities.
So things that stem from a different language base.
Let me say a little bit more. I mean, anthropologists have generally given up on the idea of studying cultures because there aren't any separated cultures anymore. We talk about culturing, constant process. Because I mean, we already have, Asia is us. We are Asia. I mean, you can't anymore separate them out in any clear and obvious way. So we already have the voices of the other.
Yeah.
And the way I like to think about it is that the moment let's say you and I are relating, we are culturing. We're going to create our own subculture. It's not going to be exactly where you came from. It's not going to be exactly where I came from. It's its own, now it has its own life.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be identical to any life that's ever been there before. So if you can understand not, oh, I've got to learn how to be you, and you've got to learn how to be me, or we can't get along, we're going to use all those resources to create a we. It's going to be a drawing from the past and creating itself. So I tend to look optimistically at the possibility of finding ways.
Culturing.